mandatory unemployment. 3% with 100 million workers would mean 3 million people unemployed across the nation. Now, the only way that we accept that is because of the political legislation that create order, that this is how it's supposed to be, and if you work harder, you can make it too. But in the meantime, 3 million people are unemployed. And then there's millions of people that are underemployed. While not a whole lot of people make $7.25 an hour, a whole lot of people do make $7.50 and $7.75. This is not so that they can support themselves. This is so that you and I can use our taxes to supplement the wealth being created by the corporation that employs them. Forms of political organization and leadership. We're going to look at band societies, foragers, tribal societies that are usually horticulturalists and or pastoralists, chiefdom societies that get into agriculture, and state societies. Now, each one of these has a larger population. Each one of these also has technology that produces more food so they can have a larger population. Economy is always at the foundation. Band societies. Egalitarian, simple kin units. What this notices up here on the top is that they are separate. They are band societies, separate groups, family bands or patrilocal bands. But they are related in these different bands in the area through marriage. Then tribes. You do have no central leadership in tribes. We saw early on the Yanomamo video in which the leader was leading by example. And that's how tribes are usually done. Then chiefdoms. Now you have for the first time centralized authority. Heredity goes down through the chief line like through the king line. It's a ranked society. Those that are ranked closer to the chief or the king have more power, more prestige. In this society you have more sodalities where you have groups across that agree on things and cooperate on those things that they agree on, and it's based on kinship still. State societies. You have a capital, a dominant group. Stratified layers and authority. Institutions. Ranked society and a class society. Certainly there's sodalities, and kinship matters. But it's really your kinship with cash that matters in a society like this. We just saw that the 1% takes astronomical amounts of money out of the system while leaving people in poverty. What do you think they use that money for? To influence the political process. You've heard of lobbyists. Well, lobbyists are political advisors now. They advise the politicians on what they're supposed to legislate. The politicians come to us to tell us what they're going to legislate and why we should accept it. But it's really legislating the dominance of those with cash. Band societies. They're not centralized, no centralized power. Everyone is equal. Egalitarian egalitarian social structure, informal leaders, persuasive power, but no authority. But in the society, you know everybody. To get along is part of what you want to do. Leadership based on individual skills and earned respect. In these societies, we tend to think that nobody has individuality because they all work as one. But in fact, they're able to develop their own individuality to bring it into that group more effectively than we are, because the restraints on what they can do are much less. We have restraints on how we look, our education, what our economics are, how much cash we have. Leadership based on individual skill and earned respect. You go to that person because you know they have skills in this area. It's found among foraging societies. The group size varies, but they're always rather small, probably 40 to 60. And this is one of the reasons that egalitarian lifestyle works so well. Tribal societies. Here is a picture of the Yanomamo. They're also not centralized in their power. They have a head man, but he leads by example. Their egalitarian social structure, based on horticulture and pastoral economics. They have informal leaders who use persuasive power, but no authority. The leader is called the head man or the big man. Various types of kinship organizations throughout. Kinship is how they organize. Various types of sodalities. A group that cross-cuts a society and whose membership is based on common interest rather than kinship or inheritance or residence. Ranked stratification. Egalitarian society is a society in which individuals have the same category of age and gender. A society where the individuals with the same category of age and gender have equal access to wealth, prestige, and power. Nobody goes without access, though. Ranked society, and society in which individuals' access to prestige and wealth is limited by the number of positions available in that society. Chiefdom societies, centralized power within the chief, of course. The chief is judge and jury. The chief is the president and the vice president. The chief is the decider. They're non-egalitarian. Social ranking is present, but people still hold autonomy. They can still support themselves, still getting their food from nature. Formal leaders, heredity through chief's line, the bloodline with authority. Often the chief is thought to have direct connection to the supernatural. This is almost always used when you have a dominance hierarchy. You'll see the military or that type of an organization on one side to maintain it, and the religious leaders on the other side. The religious leaders say, yes, you can't violate this, and then when you do, if you do, the military comes in. It's a redistributive economy. Things are gathered up, and then the chief redistributes to the communities. State societies, centralized, non-egalitarian, political structure with authority that is legally constituted. Central government with monopoly over the use of force. Formal leaders and laws. Policing is institutionalized. It's a stratified society. There is a tremendous variation with them. Parliamentary, democratic, authoritarian, communist, totalitarian, fascist. We could go on and on. Socialist, democratic would work as well. Stratified societies, a society with unequal access to resources within the same gender and status group. Stratified state societies, a society in which institutions are based on coercive power and authority. Inequality exists within social groupings. State societies, unlike chiefdoms, where ranking is based on kinship, the state society's citizenship regulates social relations and defines a person's rights and duties. States are characterized by government, a set of status roles that become separate from other aspects of social organization. Central to the functioning of governments is a bureaucracy, an administrative hierarchy characterized by fixed rules. In most state societies, there is not a democracy. There is a authoritarian rule. Democracy is the idea to break that, to give the power back to the people. Income disparity in the U.S. from 1979 until 2010, I believe this, 2007. And what we can see, just what we saw in that video, the lowest quintile to the highest quintile. The first 80% have all lost wealth through that time, from 1979 to 2007. The top 20% has gained wealth, and the 1% has by far gained the most. So you can see by this chart, changes with tax cuts, with slow wage increases or stagnation, inflation, the cost of living going up, and reduction and destruction of pensions, that this has all come about. Tax cuts to the wealthy allow them to keep that cash Instead of being job creators and invest it in their company for jobs, they invest it for stocks. Slow wage growth, as well as inflation, means people can't support themselves on a greater and greater level. This is what has caused this problem. This has been political legislation that has been chosen by the 1%, lobbied, advised to the politicians, and they've legislated it. Why? Because it is empire. It is a global empire that the top 1% is dealing with. And the United States politicians are legislating for their power over the planet.
Well, you're appropriately situated between, of, and in both countries to wrestle with this issue of why the United States has become, by many definitions, one of the harshest and most unforgiving societies of all the democracies.
So in this film, I want you to listen to what Naomi Klein talks about, the influence that this kind of a culture of individualism, of not meeting the needs for everybody and then turning around and blaming the people left out for the problem, and how that affects us as individuals living in this, accepting this, normalizing this, saying this is the way our society is supposed to be.
You know the list of where we are on the infant mortality and healthcare and all of that. Mm-hmm. What's your take on that?
Well, part of it, I don't have the answers, but I think part of it is that this is a self-reinforcing cycle. It's not that I think Americans are meaner than people in other countries, but I think that a lot of other countries do say to their citizens, we will take care of the basics. And let me be clear here, in every country this idea is under siege, including my own. But the idea is...
The reason that it is under siege is because of the global market. The global market wants everything privatized for profit. So when you wake up in the morning, you're going to go out and begin to give money to the market everywhere you go. In fact, that's why your education now requires loans as you move up and get a higher education, so that you will be connected to the financial institutions and they can determine your life.
We think that healthcare is a human right. We think education is a human right. Everybody should have a good education. Everybody should have good health care. We're not going to create a double-tier system. Everybody's kids are going to have to go to the same schools, this sort of thing. So once you have the basics cared for, it frees up some compassion to care for other people. What I find is the biggest difference between me and my American friends, and I'm American, I have a dual citizenship because both my parents are American, is that Americans have to worry so much about the basics from a very young age. 22-year-olds have to worry about where's their health care going to come from, and once you've got kids, you're immediately worried about paying for this astronomical cost of sending them to a good university. And I think that makes you insular, and it dampens your compassion for others because it takes so much just to care for your family in this country. And I think that trains you to look inward as opposed to outward. And that if you live somewhere that says to you, actually, you know what, your kids are going to be okay. We're going to make sure that if they get sick, they're taken care of, and they can go to a public university that is at the same tier that everybody's kids go to, that is at a very high quality, then you actually have a little more space to be more compassionate. So I think that when you have these stronger institutions, and when you have these guarantees, recognize them as basic human rights, you change the values of a culture.
One of the reasons besides profit that this is, if we connected to each other, if we didn't think of ourselves as individuals fighting all the other individuals, fighting for our own prestige and status all the time, if we had basics that we all took care of, that we all pitched in for health care and education and basic costs of being alive and partaking in our society, then we would have time to connect to each other, to look around and see what the system is really creating. And that is dangerous.